where does this get complicated? There were two things that the engineers that designed this thing didn't really know. And what were they? Well, one of them, and I had a long talk with this about Roger, and he couldn't give me an answer, is what the current was under the Straits. The way they put this pipe down is essentially they dug a trench all the way across the Straits, even at the deepest parts. Backfilled the trench a little bit with gravel, put the pipe on top of it. The pipe's just sitting there on the gravel. It's not held in any way. In the design calculations, the engineers assumed the maximum current on the bottom at the Straits was 1.8 knots. That turned out to be an error. We don't know what the maximum current is. If that guy can't tell me, I don't think anybody can. But it's clear that at 1.8 knots, you don't have to worry about water washing out the dirt under the pipe. The currents were higher than that. I've heard estimates as high as 6 knots during a siege. That's a lot of water flow. Something has caused this pipe to wash out. You can see here, there's a hole under here. Now, if I'm right, we're going to have another video here. And this video is a mystery to me. You look at this one, and I call it a diver, a shovel, and a washout. It's going to show you a washout here from a film Enbridge release called Dent Inspection Video. We'll talk about that a little more. Got this diver coming down. He's got a regular old shovel in his hand. Not quite sure what he's planning to do here. It's pretty deep, 120 feet, and there's the date, pretty recent. So he's doing something down there. He takes his shovel and he leans it up against the line and starts looking around. There's some stuff floating around. So he's got the shovel down, and you can see there's a washout under the pipe. He's looking and looking and looking. And again, I'm not quite sure. He's got the shovel sitting there. But it gets very interesting about here. For some reason, these videos are just not running through. That's what I wanted to show you. That's at the end. Well, I don't think he was going to fill that hole in with a shovel. Somebody was a little, this is a little mysterious to me. I can't say what's going on here, but look at that washout under the pipe. It's pretty serious. Another thing, the Line 5 guys that designed it, and they couldn't have known this, is that in '58 we'd opened the St. Lawrence Seaway and let invasive species in. What that did is cause stuff to grow on the pipe that they hadn't contemplated. How much does that affect things? Is that weight significant? Well, you could look at it and say, I don't know, but that's not what engineers do. We calculate stuff. What Enbridge has done about these washouts is put in these screw anchor supports, they're called. We'll touch back on that a little bit, but what's interesting about this one is it's already been followed by a fishing net. When I raised this point, that there's weight on this pipe, Enbridge addressed it. They hired a consultant called GEI. It's pretty interesting. They wrote a nice report on it, and it was given to the governor, and it said that the GEI did not find any literature that said bacterial loads on pipes could increase corrosion. They also said that these mussels are a thin layer and don't affect anything. Well, this report really gave me a problem. First of all, it's well known, and the Army Corps engineers, everybody else says, long stated, that a thick layer of zebra mussels on a metallic surface causes anoxia, pH reduction, bacteria growth. And so this was written in the 60s. Why didn't GEI realize that the Army Corps engineers know something about this? My conclusions regarding this mussel incrustation report is that I don't know where these engineers came from. It doesn't contain any useful engineering information. What you'd want. You'd like to be able to know how much those mussels weigh. Well, they draw a conclusion that they don't put any load, but they don't do any calculations. It doesn't address the corrosive environment. They focused on the biology. And one thing that is very interesting, and we'll come back to, is Enbridge gave these guys a piece of pipe encrusted with zebra mussels. Now, normally if there's a specimen in a scientific report, there's a full chain of custody. You know where it came from. You know who handled it. There is no information in this report at all about where GEI got the piece of pipe that Enbridge gave them that was supposedly covered with zebra mussels. Very interesting. You know, like I said, engineers don't guess, we calculate. And this is the first of the calculations that you'll really see. What this is over here is what we call the safety factor. At 1.0, the stress on something is equal to the yield strength and it's going to start bending. You never want to get to 1.0 safety factor. Now, the original design of the straight section of this pipe called for 75-foot support spacing and 600 PSI max. If you do that, you find that there's a safety factor of 4. Well, I liked that because that's about the number I would have chosen for safety factor for something that's in this hazardous a location. In Enbridge's reports that we'll get to, because of those washouts, there have been pieces of this pipe that are unsupported. We really don't know how. In one report says there have been unsupported spans as long as 190 feet. That's out here somewhere. What I really want to point out is that there's 2 other lines here. This is with natural gas liquids in the pipe and no zebra mussels. This is with light crude in the pipe and 2 inches of zebra mussels. This is with dilbit and 4 inches. What these show is that when you get out with a heavier cargo to more than 150 feet spacing, you're putting some pretty darn good stress on this pipe. You're bending it. It has been beat around pretty good. It has locked up stress in it, as I showed you in that other pipe. Now, one thing that's insidious about locked up stress is there's no way to measure it except in a lab. And if you cut a piece out, well, the stress is gone, so that doesn't do you any good. There's not a man on this planet that can tell you how much stress is locked up in the pipe under the straits. That causes some concern. Because of the washouts, Enbridge started on a campaign. Actually, back here, it was Lakehead, and they started to do remote vehicle inspections of the pipe. It was built, this is 10 years after it was built. By 1975, that's, 21 years, 22 years after it was built, they were starting to have bad washouts. First thing they did to try and do this is they stuck big cloth bags under the pipe and then pumped them full of cement to prop the pipe up. That didn't turn out to be the best plan. So as things went on, 87 they added 7 grout bags, 92 they added 6, and by then we'd come up with those screw anchor supports I showed you earlier. And so 2001, Enbridge started switching from the grout bags to putting real mechanical supports, screw anchors. In this campaign, they keep doing it, and up this point, in 2012, they are up to 106 supports. This came to be a very contentious thing during the Governor's Pipeline Board. People were really wondering about this. So Enbridge submitted to the government in a form that you could access by FOIA a list of all the supports that were put under this pipe. 7 pages of that. What you discover, if you add up all these supports, is about half of the pipe, half of the unburied section of the pipe, is still resting on the ground and is subject to washout. So even though Enbridge has done a lot of work, they put down 122 of these supports, there's still a lot of pipe to go that's not supported. So we're going to get to some conclusions here, kind of the end of this section. And these are my conclusions. Line 5 was designed to comply with this code, ASME D31.4. It's like a building code. And I say it's an engineering masterwork when it was constructed. And what the restrictions in the easement led to a very conservative design. Like I say, the 600 PSI maximum, there's no way that under normal operation you could ever get close to that under the pipe. There's 3 ways you can get close to it. One is if you valved off the pipe at Mackinac City and left the pumps running a common way. The other would be if the drag reduction agent failed for some time, the pumps had ejected, and you had a pressure jump because you no longer had drag reduction. And the third is if you miss operation. If you slam a valve quickly, you know your pipes at home will rattle and bang. You slam a valve quickly on a big pipe like this and it just blows in half. Valves have to be closed very slowly. That's why the minimum time to close the line off under the Straits is 3 minutes. If you close the valves any faster, it's like trying to run a freight train into a mountain. It's not going to work out well. The 75-foot length restriction is very reasonable at the time of design, but then since then, changes in the cargo density and marine life on the line has increased the bending stress so that the safety factors that were originally agreed to certainly no longer apply. The deal that was made in 1953 has not been kept as far as how much stress that line should see. And that's what this says, corrosion, locked up stress affect the calculation. You can't determine really if the line is still in compliance or not with the code. Consequently, the next point, again, they've added 122 plus or minus supports, trying to read that spreadsheet was Enbridge's attempt at transparency. I was not particularly impressed by that. You know, it could have been a nice Excel spreadsheet instead of that thing they said. Much remains to be revealed about this pipeline. There's a lot of things we don't know. The time gap between 93 and 2012, where the MPSC just looked the other way, that's when the line was reconfigured extensively. We don't know how it happened. We know that there was no regulatory input during that period. There's significant technical information that's probably missing. Usually in a corporate takeover, when Enbridge took over from Lakehead, and Lakehead had the files from Bechtel and the files from now defunct Merritt, Chapman, and Scott. In my experience with acquisitions, a lot of that stuff got lost. You've heard a lot of talk about the original life, or the design life of this pipe. Scott Trujan, the guy that works on it, said everybody that was working on the pipe thought it was good for 50 years. Somewhere in Enbridge's possession, I would hope, there's a copy of the original contract. Would you answer that question? I believe 50 years would be a reasonable value based on calculation. Now we're a little bit past it. We're through that section. That was fun, huh? So now we're getting to the next part here. Rust never sleeps. This is the whole part of running an H pipeline.